I want you to try and visualize something for me for a second.
Okay.
Picture that exact split second
Mm-hmm.
when a really confusing idea finally, clicks. You know that feeling?
Yeah, the aha moment.
Exactly. The aha moment. It feels almost like magic, right? Like a light bulb just flicks on in your head.
Right. But what's so fascinating is that it isn't just a metaphor. Biologically, it's a specific, explosive event happening in your brain.
It's not a dimmer switch slowly turning up.
No, it's a firework going off inside your skull.
And fireworks, well, they require energy. They need a spark. But here's the thing that really kept me up last night after reading today's sources.
What's that?
What happens if we stop making the sparks?
That is, I think, the defining question of our time.
We have two incredible sources for this deep dive that seem totally different on the surface. But when you put them together, they tell a pretty wild and honestly kind of a scary story. So first, we've got this heavy-hitting neuroscience paper on something called the global neuronal workspace hypothesis.
Which sounds incredibly dense, I know. But it's essentially the instruction manual for how the brain physically creates consciousness.
Right. And then we have this newer paper, the extended hollowed mind. And this one argues that the way we're all using generative AI right now,
Chatbots, LLMs,
all of it, might be actively dismantling that very machinery.
So our mission today is really to connect the dots between how the brain creates awareness through what the papers call struggle and ignition, and why the frictionless nature of modern AI poses a genuine threat to our cognitive sovereignty.
Cognitive sovereignty. I love that phrase. It sounds like we're declaring independence for our own brains.
In a way, we are.
But okay, before we get to the AI apocalypse, we have to start with the biology. Because I think most of us assume seeing things is, easy. I look at my coffee cup, I see a coffee cup. It doesn't feel explosive.
Well, that's the illusion of efficiency. The global neuronal workspace theory, or GNW, explains what's really happening under the hood. So imagine your brain isn't one big computer, but a building full of tiny, separate offices.
Okay, like a corporate office building. I can picture that.
Exactly. You have an office for vision, an office for sound, an office for motor skills. Most of the time, the workers in these offices are just kind of typing away in the dark. They're processing information, but they aren't talking to each other. They are unconscious processors.
So my visual cortex sees the cup. The person in the vision office sees it. But the conscious me, I don't know it yet.
Exactly. The information is local. It hasn't entered the workspace. For you to become consciously aware of that cup, for you to be able to say, hey, that's my cup, or decide to pick it up, that information has to be broadcast to the whole building.
So it goes from being a private memo to a company-wide announcement.
A very, very loud announcement. And this is where that term ignition comes from in the source material. It describes consciousness as a nonlinear, explosive event. It's not gradual at all. It's sudden.
Okay, so what triggers the explosion then? It's not just random, is it?
No, it's all about signal strength. So if a signal is weak, like a subliminal image flashing on a screen for a millisecond, it might tickle the visual cortex, but it dies out there. It just fizzles. The rest of the building never hears about it.
The guy in the vision office just sees it, shrugs, and goes back to work.
Precisely. But if the signal is strong enough, or if you're paying close attention, it hits a certain threshold. And when it crosses that line, it triggers this massive, coherent activation of long-range neurons, specifically large pyramidal cells in cortical layers 3 and V.
Whoa, hang on. Pyramidal cells and layers.
Yeah.
What now? You're losing me.
Right, sorry. Layers 3 and V.
If I were to cut open a brain, metaphorically, please, what am I actually looking at? Are these like the superhighways of the brain?
That's a fantastic way to put it. Think of them like the fiber optic backbone of the internet. These pyramidal cells are huge. They have these long axons, cables, basically, that physically connect distant parts of the brain, the front to the back, left to right. And when they ignite, they synchronize. It's an all-or-nothing event.
So they all fire at the exact same time.
Yes. The paper mentions this study with monkeys. They found that when a stimulus was consciously perceived, the activity didn't just trickle forward, it ignited the self-sustaining reverberation all the way up to the prefrontal cortex.
And the key phrase there is all or nothing.
Right.
It's binary. You either see it or you don't. There's no half seeing.
Exactly. It's a threshold. And this brings us to what they call the router analogy. The GNW isn't one single spot in the brain where consciousness lives.
Hmm.
It's a distributed router. It allows your memory, your value systems, your verbal centers to all share the same piece of information instantly.
Okay, but how fast instantly? I mean, my computer is fast. Is the brain faster?
Yeah. Actually, and this was one of the wildest details in the paper, relative to a computer, it's agonizingly slow. When researchers look at brain waves during this ignition, they see this very specific spike. It's called the P300 wave.
P300. I'm guessing the 300 stands for something important.
It stands for 300 milliseconds. That's the delay. The spike happens nearly a third of a second after the stimulus even appears.
Wait, a third of a second? That's a really long time. If I'm playing a video game, 300 ping is basically unplayable.
It's an eternity in processing time.
Mm-hmm.
But that delay is the cost of ignition. That is the time it takes for the brain to gather the signal, reach that threshold, and mobilize the entire workspace. That P300 wave is the signature of consciousness.
So if you don't get the wave,
You didn't consciously see it.
wow, this really drives home how much energy and coordination is required just to be aware of something. It's not passive at all. It's expensive.
It's extremely active, and the paper makes this chilling point about anesthesia to prove it.
Oh.
We tend to think anesthesia just turns off the brain, like flipping a switch. But that's not what happens.
It's not.
No. Drugs like propofol or ketamine, they don't just put your sensory organs to sleep. Your ears still hear sound waves, your eyes still process light, the local offices are still working.
Hang on, that's actually kind of terrifying. You're saying if I'm under anesthesia, my eyes are still sending signals, but I, the conscious me,
Yeah.
am just gone.
You're gone. Because the drugs chemically disconnect that long-range network we just talked about, they essentially cut the cables. So the local processors are humming along, but the broadcast is dead. The workspace is offline.
So consciousness is a broadcast that requires a massive electrical surge to maintain. And if you cut the wires, it just stops.
Correct.
Okay, so we've established consciousness is hard work. It requires ignition. Now I want to pivot because we know we can chemically disconnect the system with drugs. But the second paper you brought,
Right.
it suggests we might be doing the exact same thing to ourselves, just without the drug.
With convenience.
With convenience.
That's the whole argument of the extended hollowed mind. If ignition requires a threshold of signal strength, well, learning requires a threshold of effort.
We've all heard of System 1 and System 2 thinking, right? This is Daniel Kahneman's greatest hits.
It's the foundation here. System 1 is fast, intuitive, automatic, it's cheap, energy-wise. System 2 is slow, analytical, and it burns a lot of calories. It's the thinking part of thinking.
And the hollowed mind paper basically argues that our brains are lazy, right? Is that too harsh?
Cognitive misers is the polite academic term for it, but yes. The paper posits that System 2, that hard, grinding thought process, is biologically expensive. So the brain treats it as a last resort. Our default setting is to avoid it if we can.
I mean, I get that. If I can solve a problem without thinking hard, I'm going to do it. Why burn the extra calories?
Because of the catch. We need System 2 to learn. And this is where the neuroanatomy gets really specific again. We have to talk about the anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC.
The ACC. Okay, what's its job? Is it another router?
Think of the ACC as your brain's conflict detector.
A conflict detector.
Yeah. When you encounter something confusing or contradictory or just plain difficult, the ACC lights up. It sends an alarm signal to the lateral prefrontal cortex saying, hey, System 1 can't handle this. We have a problem. We need the heavy machinery.
So that feeling of frustration when you're trying to learn something new, ugh, why isn't this clicking feeling? That's not just me being annoyed. That's the ACC doing its job.
That is the ACC doing its job. That is cognitive conflict. And that conflict is necessary. It triggers what educational psychologists call germane cognitive load.
Germane cognitive load. That sounds like jargon. Break it down for us.
It's the specific type of mental effort required to build new schemas, new mental structures in your long-term memory. Without that specific struggle, without the ACC firing that alarm, the brain just doesn't bother building the new structure.
So to tie it back to the first paper, you can't bypass the struggle. The ignition of understanding only happens when the brain is forced to resolve that uncertainty.
Yes. You have to pay the toll. There's no free lunch in neurobiology.
And this brings us right to the danger zone, the hollowed mind. It sounds like a sci-fi horror movie, but it's describing something we're all seeing happen right now with generative AI.
It's describing a state where a person mistakes access to information for the ability to use it. And with AI, that risk is scaling up massively.
The paper calls it the sovereignty trap. I want to dig into this because I think we've all felt this. You ask a chatbot a question, it gives you a perfect, fluent answer, and you feel smart. You feel like you did that.
Right. But let's look at the mechanism. An LLM provides an immediate, fluent, and plausible answer. It's frictionless.
Frictionless, which means no conflict.
Exactly. No conflict means the ACC stays quiet, the